I guess the first item on the agenda is to see if there's anyone from the public present who would like to make a comment to the board. And I don't see anybody in the participant list, but I welcome if somebody would like to make a comment. Okay, so the next item is attendance. All right, so Ram.
Present.
Bob.
Present.
Patrick.
I am here. Good morning.
Morning. Michael. I don't think he was able to make it today. Ajit. Lauren.
Here.
Good morning.
Morning.
Dan.
I'm here.
Fred. Maura.
Here.
Paul.
Sorry, I had to find that mute button here.
Susan.
Present.
And then Jen. I don't think she's joining us. So then it looks like we have guests from agencies. So we have Rob, we have Shan. Is there anybody else from agencies who I've missed?
Just joined. So
okay, great.
Hi, Katie.
Morning.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else who I may have missed? Okay, cool. Great. Welcome. All right. So I sent out the agenda late yesterday. So apologies for that. I do have a quick addition to the agenda, and that is next year's calendar. So we have been meeting on the first Friday of the month at 8:30 and holding learning sessions for the third Friday also at 8:30. So for regular meetings, does this time still work? Does anybody want to propose a new and different time? Any discussion? If you want to keep it, you want to use the hand raise function. Cool, perfect. Thanks, everyone. So we will continue meeting at this time. Our next meeting will be January 6th. So we will see you right at the beginning of the new year. That would mean that our learning sessions would be the third Friday, also at 8:30. We have been discussing holding regular training sessions. We're trying to plan them in advance. So we have data security, FOIA. There were a couple of other topics that I cannot remember off the top of my head, but we were planning on bringing outside folks to come and discuss these topics with both the Data Governing Board and data stewards. So if that still sounds good, a thumbs up or a hand raise would be great. Awesome. Cool. Hopefully we will have that schedule established and ready for you by the next Data Governing Board meeting. And again, we always welcome feedback from all of you. So if there are specific topics you want to hear about, please let me know. So that was that. The next item on the agenda, unless anybody else has something to add. Okay, so the next item we have is the data stewards. So since we haven't met with them recently, but we did conduct a survey that we shared with every data steward for P20 Win, and to figure out how we should best structure the groups, especially as we are adding new agencies and staff. This group is growing pretty quickly, and so we wanted to make sure that the structure of the meetings was beneficial for everybody who's participating. So I'm going to turn it over to Coral, who's going to go over the findings.
Great. So in the survey, we asked several questions, and I think the biggest takeaway was that the members of the data stewards, for the most part, in going forward, want to focus on kind of sharing projects individuals are working on, discussing agency data, data management, tools for analysis and data management, and kind of sharing that and discussing with one another. But we do have some slides that are just kind of charts we made for some of the questions that I will share. Great. So one of the questions we asked is like, how interested are you in these discussion topics? And we had a few that we've discussed in the past. So data matching, policies and processes, tools, and current projects. So the ones that received the most kind of somewhat interested and very interested, again, were those tools and current projects, with like mixed interest in data matching and policy and process. So it does seem like going forward, the focus could be on tools and current projects. We also asked kind of what activities would you be interested in data steward meetings. They could select multiple choices, which is why this doesn't add up to 100%, but 71% selected both the updates from Data Governing Board or Executive Board and also learning sessions related to agency data, with the participating agencies kind of facilitating meetings and rotating each meeting. 57% did say that they would like regular updates on data requests, and then 43% said open discussion and working sessions on data requests. And then we also had a question that was working sessions on data requests only if needed. That only had a 14% response. We also asked how often should meetings be set, with the options of monthly, quarterly, and biannually. 67% that they would like to have quarterly meetings rather than the current monthly meetings. 33% said keeping them monthly, and no one said biannually. And finally, we asked how should the agenda for meetings be set? And again, they could respond to multiple choices. The top two choices were that there would be a standing agenda items, but also rotating meeting facilitators develop the agenda. So we could develop like a hybrid where there are standing agenda items, but then there are meeting facilitators that we rotate through agencies, and they can develop their own agenda that's outside of those standing agenda items that we cover each meeting. I will stop sharing. And you have any questions or comments, please share.
So we will be sharing this with the data stewards. Our next meeting would be the third Wednesday of January. So we will be sharing this in advance with them and then discussing it with them at the next meeting. But we welcome any comments or feedback that anybody has right now. Okay, cool. So the next item on the agenda is the data request summary. So it's been 2 weeks since you have seen this document. I did share an updated version with data sources with you all. I'm going to share my screen and go over it with you again. This will be a standing item on the on this agenda, and we will also be sharing it with the executive board when they meet on Friday, next Friday. So we haven't had any new data requests submitted since our last meeting. As you can see, I added a column that identifies the data sources, and then I added the number of the data request for those that have them. So you can see that we have quite a few in development.
Katie, could you do the presentation mode so it's bigger? Sorry.
Of course, sorry. Thought that I had. Okay, so you can see that we have quite a few incoming and in development, and some that are in the process of being revised. So the BCG request is being revised as a result of the meetings that we've had with different participating agencies. These are the requests that have been submitted and are being reviewed by participating agencies. And these are the requests that are in the process of being matched or are actively in the analysis phase. I know that I went through this rather quickly, so if anybody wants me to go back to a specific slide, please let me know. Thoughts, comments? Okay. So as this gets updated, we will be sending out additional drafts. Michael, I see you have joined us. Welcome. I'm going to add you to the attendance.
Thank you. Sorry I'm a little late. I apologize.
Oh, no worries.
Katie, this is Fred
Oh.
North. I'm here too as well.
Oh,
also
excellent.
a little late, but I've been
Cool.
here for a
Thank
few
you
minutes.
for thank you for letting me know. Cool.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So if there are no comments or questions about the active data requests, we'll move on to the next. Moving right along, you guys, this morning. So we have policy and process updates. So the first policy, I shared both the data matching policy that reflects the feedback that we received from CSCU. And we're also anticipating some additional comments from CSU. Coral can go through the changes if you are interested in doing that. But also, we just want to stress that we really value hearing from everybody. So, please share your feedback when you have a chance. So I'll turn it back over to Coral.
Great. So there weren't very many big changes from the feedback we received. So moving a couple of the steps around, we added the definitions for the data matching report that's completed after the match results have been accepted by the recipient. We also added a definition for the data transfer log that's completed by the data integration hub, as well as the participating agencies when they transfer data to the data recipient, and also added a definition for key data, which is the crosswalk files that are sent to the data recipient after the data match. Changed the name from resultant data in the steps to key data, and then other than that, it was just some small changes that I think added a little bit more clarity to the steps, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same other than those few changes.
I know that we only shared this with you yesterday, so again, I apologize for getting you this information so on such short notice. We are stressing to please send us feedback. Our goal is to vote on this at the January meeting so that we can approve it, add it to our governance manual, and share it with the executive board. Okay. Oh, Jan? You are muted.
I am muted. Thank you. Sorry. Do you want to have a discussion about any of the points now, or are you wanting that to happen? And this is I guess.
Yeah, we can if you want to, this is a great opportunity.
Because there's one piece that I think that would really benefit from some dialogue, and that is the time at which the data files that are used for matching are deleted. So the process that we have been working with historically has been, well, let me just back up to the process. So when the matching files are sent to DOL for a match, the document, if you haven't read it, kind of outlines what goes on. By the way, I really appreciate the changes that you've made based on our comments. And I also appreciate that we have more comments coming. So thank you very much for that. When the match is done, that done point comes after the match has been maximized. DOL has done everything it can to make sure the match is as good as it can. It's communicated with the agencies who are involved. And everybody sort of agrees this is as best as the match can be. We're done. And at that point, then the Department of Labor creates the key file, which has just the fake IDs and the group ID in it. At that point, the match is done. It's been approved. There's no need to hold on to the match files anymore because the match is complete. Right. So historically, we've given DOL, well, those files were supposed to be deleted immediately. The CCIC had a 24-hour deletion time. The rest of us went with 5 days. I'm not sure why we had a distinction there, but we were giving DOL maybe some time in case somebody was sick or out of the office and couldn't actually get to it, a little bit of time to delete those files. In the current iterations that I've seen of the DSA, I might not have the right, or the process, it was pushed to 10 days. I'm like, why? We don't need more time. The match process is over. We need to get rid of these files. In the current version that I've seen in this, and I haven't finished, I appreciate you guys sending the documents, and time is crunched for everybody. There were some things incident stuff you sent to Ajit and I, which I also really appreciate. That I haven't gotten through it all, but in that as well, there's an additional change for this particular thing that says we're gonna use the data deletion timeframe that's set up in the DSA, and I don't even know what that is. I think in this particular juncture, this file, the deletion of the match file is separate from the deletion of analytic files or resultant files because it's only about the match. Once the match is done, you don't need that PII anymore. And I'm focusing in on this particular piece because this is a part of the breach that we had, right? DOL had a match file that wasn't deleted and it got sent. It got sent out. So I think it's really important to have a very structured time when that file gets deleted, to not have it vary between requests, to have it be a short period of time, because once the match is finalized and finished and you've got the key file, they're just not needed anymore. So there's no need to have people's social security numbers and identifiers sitting around. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. And I just thought I'd like to get people's reaction. Is there a reason that I'm not understanding that they need to be kept? From Department of Labor's standpoint, is there a reason why they can't be deleted within 24 hours or at least 5 days? What do people think? And I appreciate the opportunity to raise this discussion point. If we don't have time for it fully now, we can table it and talk about it later.
I'm just going to add a couple quick things. And Jane, I really appreciate it. This is a good time for like dialogue on it. And I think that like what you're bringing up, like these are good issues to figure out how to address. So for data sharing agreement, we have templates, but they can be modified for every request by the agencies. And for reasons that I myself can't remember, we had 10 in the template, 10 days in the template. And I thought that was at some point people had kind of agreed on that. If there's consensus for 5 days or 1 day or 0 days, like then that's fine. I think we'll go sort of what the consensus from the agencies is. But for some reason, it was 10 at one point through some of these discussions. And we'll make it whatever kind of the agencies want in the agreements. The policy process documents refer to it because there could be variations for agencies. So CCIC has a day. Somebody could say, I want 0 days for mine. And so we're saying like, okay, look at what the agreement for this match says the timeline should be and use that timeline. Another approach would be to have like a standard timeline that applies to all requests. I think these are both like sort of reasonable options, but we said, okay, like at this point, we'll let that be determined request by request, and we'll just use the timeline for that specific request. But they're both viable approaches, and like as from the OPM side, and a bit DOL is the one who has to kind of abide by a lot of this, but so I don't see a huge issue with any of them. Two things kind of on the timing to sort of like minimize some of the risk points in this process. So I believe what's in the documents, correct me if it's wrong, but the deletion would be after the match is completed, and that requires circulating the match results with the agencies, the recipient, and getting the written confirmation that everyone accepts that. And that process can take a few days, just depending on how responsive people are or not. So I think there's time where after the match is completed, the identifiers are sort of sitting until that match process is confirmed, and that's a risk point in it. So the faster and the more responsive people can be, the shorter that period of time is, and the less risk there is in that process. But that right now, like there's just however long it takes for the agencies and the recipient to confirm it, which people are pretty responsive, but that could take a little bit of time. The other, I think, and for the folks who've been doing this longer, I think one reason for adding that buffer of 1 day, 5 days, 10 days was in some cases the match will come back, people will approve it, the resultant data will be sent, or sorry, the analytic data will be sent to the recipient, and they'll go, oh, I found something, there's an issue. We have to go back and redo something. And so they kept it for some of that back and forth. I don't know if that's the case or not, but that's sort of what I understood, that occasionally there's something where it's like, oh, we have to go back and address something.
I don't recall
That's-
there ever being a repeat there. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Patrick.
Okay.
Oh, there have been repeats.
Okay.
So that, I mean, it's always a question of which, where is, so there's risks in having the data sent again. Because then you have more transport. So, but I don't have any, I mean, I would argue for the 5 days. I agree with Jan. I don't see any need for there to be 10. I would say that the problem with the 24 hours is that, with all due respect to our data customers, when we send out the match results, we don't necessarily hear back right away. And then when we do hear back, we're not necessarily watching our email every second, or, it's just the reality that the email will come in or whatever, however the communication is. And maybe we need to formalize that a little bit better in terms of once. So, there's some, unfortunately, we have some, I hate to say the word randomness, but the reality is we have multiple responsibilities in our agency. So we can't always predict exactly to the hour when the match is going to be completed. And when the match is completed, we then inform the recipient, or we inform the appropriate parties that the match is here and these are the results. That they don't necessarily know when that is going to come. Then they don't necessarily get back to us immediately.
I
And
want to
then I'm just, I'm just saying they don't necessarily get back to us immediately. And then when they get back to us, that's when the clock should start as to when we have to delete the data.
yes.
And that's why I would argue that we should have 5 days, because we don't know when that's going to come. So, we can't be sitting around, we have work to do. So we just can't be sitting around watching our email necessarily every second, waiting for them to get back to us, because we don't know when they're going to get back to us. So, but then once they get back to us, that a clock starts, and I would argue that it should be 5 days, because we're just not sure what's going to happen in 24 hours at any particular 24-hour moment here at the exciting world of the Labor Department. So but I also agree with Jan that I'm not sure what the 10 was for. I mean, maybe that was, I think the 10 was contemplating the kind of thing that Scott talked about. And I think that what part of formalizing this process is we need to come up with a communication that really says, if you approve this data, it moves this match, we're going to delete it. So be sure you really approve this match. I think that that's also been part of the, part of what it means to upgrade this whole process, is to make sure that we're very clear to folks what is going on and what the consequences are of, say, approving a match rate.
And if there were a need, like if there were something that there were a mistake, it could be redone. People could resend the files. I think the key is minimizing the amount of time that the files are sitting. And to that end, there's sort of that the time frame for which the match occurs, which is right now this really soft and very wide window. I would encourage us to think about a realistic time frame for that. Like once the files are sent, and it should be scheduled, like I think Scott, you built into, or Katie, Coral, sorry, I don't know who exactly, have built into a timing, like we're going to coordinate when the files are sent, right? We're going to have this keeping track of the file procedure, and you're going to pay attention to when it's received and follow up within 24 hours, which is marvelous. And in that sense, that should sort of like be the beginning that's scheduled with DOL, right? In terms of when they want to receive it. And then there should be like a window, like how long does it take to do the match? A week, 2 weeks, a month? I feel like that should be, if we have a time frame for that, that would help everybody with scheduling as well. But that's a separate point, and that's not in this agreement or in this document.
Yeah, and I would just say that some matches take longer than others because it depends on how complicated the match is. I mean, we've had matches that, it just takes, we have, if everybody has a social security number on both ends, we can do the match in half an hour, even if it's millions of records. If it's probabilistic matching based on a birthday and a name, and we need to use DMV data and other things, the tools that we have, then it's going to be more lengthy, because we're going to you try things and then you know, and you have to make a judgment as to where you cut it off. I mean, that's a whole other discussion around how the whole matching process works from a technical side, which we're happy to have that discussion. But I would have a hard time with having a rigorous, how long is the match going to take? Because it's not just a question of scheduling the work here, but it's also a question of every match one match may take more time than another. And so, and we may not, unfortunately, have scheduled enough time. You know, we scheduled the time for the match, and those hours have been expended, and oops, we're not done because it was more complicated and took more work than we thought. And you don't always know that until you actually receive the data, because you have to see it to see how, you know, what, you know, how good it is in terms of, you know, being matchable.
Yeah, right.
For maybe a couple of things Patrick's bringing up here too. And again, this is the data governance board. We are having data governance questions, and like for at least the OPM side, we're trying to operate through consensus. If people settle on 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 2.5 days, like that's we'll go with. And like Patrick said, I don't remember why it's 10 days either. But we'll figure out what the right sort of consensus approach people are comfortable with. So. I think one of the points Patrick raised, I just want to reinforce for people when you're thinking about this process. So if there was something where you had to redo it, then that can be done. But the agencies, you are all then retransmitting your identifiers, the most sensitive part of the data, and the sort of, you know, the old saw is that, you know, breaches occur in transit, not at rest. That is, I think, you know, more commonly the case. And so the more times you are sending data, particularly the most sensitive information that you hold that is at most at risk, that is what we want to reduce. We want to reduce the number of times you are sending data, because that reduces your risk and the individuals whose, you know, data that we all collect and possess. And so that, I think the logic for that buffer is to reduce the you know, the number of transit points for the data in the process. But, you know, if we come to some sort of consensus, then we can capture that in the policy documents. But that I don't want to underestimate the risk point that the transmit of data has. I think for the timeline for the matching too, the other factor to consider is the arrival of data from the agencies. And again, I think as you can see, that's where we're trying to have that coordinated as much as possible. But there can be significant gaps in the timing from which data is sent from different agencies to labor for the matching process. And so again, we're trying to have that a more regularized schedule so that it's not agency A sending data over, it sits, and then agency B hasn't sent the data over, and so DOL can't do its matching, but it has data from the agencies. And so, but that piece is probably the most significant factor in the overall time of the entire process. And there's a lot of variation, particularly across agencies, and also occasionally back and forth. And so an agency will send data and they'll be like, oh, this is missing something, this wasn't there. I think you can see in some of the incident that we're describing, there's data that's missing in one of the files that's there. And so like there are, you know, issues like that where some will have to go back and retransmit, but that's also a factor in the timing for this. There's elements of it that are to some extent out of labor's control. Was there any consensus on a timeline we want to put in the policy process document for? I heard 5 days, no days, 1 day. Jan, virtual analog hand raise. Sorry, I still talk.
No, 5 days.
If 10 days is specified in the DSA, then wouldn't it be, it would make more sense to change the DSA and then for the process document, just refer to the DSA.
Yeah, and I think if there's consensus here, we can change the DSA because it's just a there is no, the DSA is a template that is then sort of executed on a case-by-case basis, and there's things you can, there's things you change the agencies, you change the data elements, you change the cell suppression, and so I think if there's consensus here, we would want those to line up, so we would change the DSA to be 5 days. If people seem comfortable, have the policy document reflect that. That to me seems uncontroversial.
And Scott, I'm assuming, but I would just clarify, it's 5 business days, right? Or 5 calendar?
I think it's 5 business.
Okay.
That is
And
a
I
very
figured
good point.
I would just
So,
say to note that, that's all.
state business days too.
Yeah,
That's right.
it's- yeah.
Get the weird President's Day.
For CCIC, our MOUs with our institutions state that, I just looked it up to see exactly what the wording is. That's where the 24 hours had come from. And it says that once the matching process has occurred, P21 system destroys all education records used for matching purposes, including PII, within 24 hours of the completion of the matching process. So to that end, I don't know how we would be able to work around. I mean, I totally understand that 5 days makes more sense. I'm just not sure how we would be able
Well,
to
if
finagle that.
well, I would just say, you know, as Scott just said, that this is a template DSA. So if we had specific data that specifically required a 24-hour destruction, we would have that in the DSA and we would follow that because that's the document our commissioner has signed. So and we would have to just really pay attention to that. And I guess the question, and I guess with the DSA itself would then have to explicitly define what this means, end of the matching process. What is the end?
That's what I was thinking.
And
Yeah.
that starts the clock. So
Right.
when the DSA is being drafted for the particular request, particularly if it's a 24-hour thing, because that really makes it, you got to really watch the clock at that point. But I don't know if we can figure that out for every single possible thing that might happen right here. And I think the 5 days would be acceptable for many of the situations that we're in and just becomes more doable. But if we were in a particular DSA where we had a requirement to do it in 24 hours, we would follow those. We would follow that document because that's the document that the commissioner has signed.
I don't want to play lawyer, and maybe more. This is we could review the MOUs sort of again with you and Jen, but the document that at some point this board will vote on to approve in whatever final version it takes is the data matching process document. So I don't know if because of the way that's worded, there can be something where it identifies this as the completion of the matching process, and then the 24-hour clock would start after that is completed, so that this process document and your MOU more would be able to line up with each other.
Yeah. That makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, so we will look into defining the end of the matching process, take your feedback, and further add it to the policy document. And again, we have time, so please, if you have additional thoughts or feedback, please share them with us. So the next and last item on the agenda today is the data security plan. And so we shared a couple of documents, a draft questionnaire, and a flow chart with you all yesterday. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott to go over this.
Sorry, I need a coffee refill. Let me screen share. So we had, I'll do screen sharing in a second, but first I'm going to thank Jan and Lauren for sort of prompting on this to get some of the data security questions to provide a framework where everyone's getting a more thorough set of questions answered before you make decisions on data request. And then particular to Peter Carey, the CISO at CSU, for drafting a very nice flowchart of this process. And similar to the data matching, I think what we'll do through this board is draft up the policy document, process documents after this discussion, circulate those with you as soon as possible. But I thought the flowchart is a useful way to go through some of the process so that everyone here can go through and get a sense of like, okay, how would this work? You know, how is this going to impact me as an agency? How is this going to impact the requesters? How does this impact the process overall? And just go through the steps so that everyone has a rough understanding of that. And I will pull this up, and because we sent this late, we did not get the opportunity to prep either Jen or Lauren on it, but if either of you want to weigh in on it, just say so, and we'll do that once I find this on my screen. So you have this, I believe, in your materials. I'm going to full screen mode. Can you still see the screen with the flowchart on it?
Yes.
Delightful. All right. So I'm gonna walk through the flowchart in case. I'm sure everyone has read it, but in case you haven't, I'm just going to walk through the flowchart. And again, if there's a question or something you want clarification, let me know. And Jan, Lauren, if you guys want to weigh in, please do so. I'll say too, like I have things that I would probably edit in this, and so I think there's like little changes in it, but like this is very good schematic for the overall process. And so there's some details we could work out. All the details matter, but this is a good way of kind of understanding the process. So this is a way in which we'd incorporate a more thorough assessment of the security environment for a data recipient in the P20 win request process. And like is laid out here, this applies both to what I think we usually call like an external data requester. So we always use Yale as the example. So like Yale is making a data request. They're not a participating agency. Someone from Yale wants to, conduct a study or do some research using state data. But this would also apply to your agencies. So, all of us here, any participating agency, the same process would apply here. So request comes in, the request gets reviewed through the participating agencies. This is sort of the standard process that we have. But the new step would be when this request is initiated, the recipient, the requester who is asking for some data through this process, again, whether it's an agency, external requester, Yale, whoever, they would also complete, in addition to the existing forms, they complete a security questionnaire. And then they would submit that as part of the process, and we can go through the flow chart for this. So what's in the security questionnaire? We drafted and circulated something with you that our CISO had reviewed, and I think of this as kind of like an interim solution. There are many different security questionnaires out there, and we can use and adopt and pop in sort of different questionnaires to improve this process over time. But there'll be some set of questions that assesses the security for the environment in which the data is going to be sent to for the agency or the entity or whatever it is. So there'll be a questionnaire that asks questions about data security so that the requester knows what's expected of them. They know here's what we need to do beforehand, so that that's a questionnaire that we can share with them, that they're not blindsided by something, and so that when you get the response to that back, what is the way in which your data is going to be handled from a security perspective once, if it were to be, approved through the rest of the process. So early on in the process, they're filling out the same forms. What is this data for? What's the study, evaluation, whatever it is that they're doing? And in addition, someone fills out the security questionnaire. So things to start thinking about is who is this? Who's filling out the security questionnaire? Is that the Yale faculty member? Is that you as a data governing board rep? Who's doing that from your agency? Who's doing that from the external partner? But that kicks off this process. We file the questionnaires in an assessment library. Just to unpack the language here, I think this is where you have a questionnaire, an assessment, and security standards as sort of three pieces. So we have security standards. These are the kind of things that are in our legal documents. So NIST, ISO, FISMA, these are security standards. There's a way of assessing whether you meet those standards, and you use a questionnaire to fill out whether you're meeting that assessment. So I think this is similar to you would have in the education world, where you have Common Core or standards. You have assessments that use or implement those standards in a different fashion, and then people take a test, or they fill out a questionnaire or something to assess whether they're meeting the standards using that particular assessment. So I know UConn has shared with us. One tool called Siglite that has a questionnaire that combines several different standards and would yield an assessment. So it gives you sort of an assessment of security after you fill out this questionnaire. So that's one option that I think is pretty promising, and we just got access to it this week. So we can start sort of digging into that, and I don't know the potential to share that with others, but we can, figure out the options there. But somehow you're filling out a questionnaire that assesses the security levels against sort of different generally federal standards, and then that goes into this library. So someone from the requester fills out a questionnaire with questions about data security. They submit it, in this case, to OPM. We keep them in a library. So if there's your agency repeatedly requests data, we can keep like, oh, this is SDE's security assessment. This is DEMIS's security assessment. Or if it's a one-off, this is someone who does not request data frequently, it's still there. But we would have this sort of library, so it doesn't need to be necessarily repeated as long as there's no changes in the security environment. So that questionnaire goes in. There's a sort of flow chart here. We would check, is the assessment on file? Do we have one from SDE? No, then we have to go and ask for the security questionnaire. Is it a year old? Or is it likely that there's changes in the process? Did something change for SDE? Did something change for Yale in the last year? And then go back and say, could you restart and fill out a new security questionnaire? So there's some freshness here because you want to make sure that you're not using a questionnaire assessment from 5 years ago and something changed, or that it's really from the right place. And so like which is it this bureau of, to use DSS as an example, is this like the are you looking at the environment from like the, if someone is requesting Medicaid data to be linked with something else, is it the Medicaid environment, is it the TANF environment, SNAP environment? So it's possible that there's sort of distinct environments, or for university, like different departments or schools or something may have different sort of secure environments. So we have to figure some of these details out about how the assessments get tracked by requesters. But fundamentally, someone fills out this questionnaire, goes into a library, we can keep them on file if there's repeat requests. Hopefully that does sort of streamline the process for agencies and anyone else that would make frequent requests for data. And if not, then that goes once we sort of figure out whether there's an assessment, they've the questionnaire, they filled out the questionnaire, they've gotten an assessment from that questionnaire, figured out whether it's recent or not, that goes to the agency. You make a risk assessment. So you are getting the results of this completed questionnaire, the assessment, and you decide for yourself, does this meet your risk tolerance level? And then you decide whether you're going to approve the request or not. So this is not a pass-fail system. This is a risk-based assessment process. And so you make a judgment call as to whether you are comfortable releasing the data, approving the request, going through the process of drafting the data sharing agreement, all of the other steps in this with the information gained from this risk assessment or this assessment process. But the risk assessment is your own as an agency. And so you could say, like this is, a study or a project that's really worthwhile, but I think the security at the requester is not sufficient for our purposes. And you could say, well, we're going to say, no, I really value this request, but security is not up to snuff. Or you could say, you know what, this is really important. I have some concerns, but it's an acceptable level of risk for us, and you'd move forward. Or you could say, this is a study that's a low priority, and the risk is very high because it's about particularly vulnerable population, or it's particularly sensitive information, or it's a lot of data, and so you have a lot of contextual information together. So you would get to make this decision using the results of this questionnaire before you finalize and approve the request and go through all the legal documentation. So again, relatively early on in the process, you would get this information and make your own sort of risk-based assessment about it. Then it goes in, again, sort of the rest of the process kicks off in the rest of the flow chart here. So things to think about in this process for sort of how to actually operationalize this is what's in this questionnaire up front, who's completing this questionnaire, again, for you as an agency, who would complete this questionnaire. And then when you get the results of it back, who's assessing the risk at your agency. What are you getting back? Does it give you the information that you need to be able to make a decision about the data request? Acknowledging, again, this is just one part of the overall process. So you're getting all the information, what is the study about? What's the population? What are the data elements they're looking for? That all is part of the sort of standard request process. In addition, you're getting some questions specific on data security answered here. So what information do you need to make a decision? And does the questionnaire, does the assessment, et cetera, do they provide the information that you and your agency needs to make a decision? I'm referring to you as this board because this board has the ultimate ability to make the sort of first decision of that process. But again, you can and should sort of consult with your own staff internally, however you want, whether it goes through, some of you have internal IRB processes, some of you have security staff on hand, some of you rely on state IT for support. So it's kind of up to your agency to determine how you want to review the assessments, what your own risk tolerance is on a request by request basis. That is everything in the flowchart from my understanding. So, or the first, for Jay and Lauren, and again, Peter Carey at CSU drafted this. It's a very nice flowchart. I don't know what software it is, but I wish we had it. So that's, I'm grateful for that. Did I miss anything in the flowchart from your understandings of it?
No, I think you did a good job. You got to the point which I eventually, which is that it's really the agencies being able to assess their risk with this particular thing. They're based upon their own standards. That is really important, and you definitely emphasize that. I just want to say there's like a little gray box. I don't know if other people see this in the window on the far lower right hand corner that kind of covers the final square in the picture that says share data. There you go. So you can see that.
That's my Teams window. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Just so you can see that. With the SIG Lite that you got access to this week, that's terrific news. Can you share, like, I'm sure it's like licensed, like not everybody can go into the tool, but is there a way to like share a PDF of the questions or something so we can get a sense for what's in it?
I have the same question myself. I don't know. So
okay.
Lauren, maybe I got access through UConn. It's UConn's license. So I'm using it like a UConn vendor, which I'm not sure is how folks intend. But to me, that's a necessary component that we are able to get the questions, that you know what the questions are, and we can share them with the requesters. But there's an answer to it. I just can't give you the answer right now. So.
Do you want me to, did you work with Chris Bernard on that?
Yeah, Chris gave me access to it.
Okay, I can ask Chris.
Maybe he could even just do some screenshots. You know, if you can't.
Sure.
I thought about like, can I screen share this? And I was like, I don't know if I can screen share this. So
let me check with him. I'll find out.
This is a UConn question. So yeah.
Okay.
The questions in it are like, what I would say, questions in it are fairly straightforward questions that I don't think are going to be surprising to people. What's your network configuration? What's your disciplinary policies for breach? Do you have a breach policy? Organizational information. So like, it's not, there wasn't anything that seemed to me like out of the ordinary. It's long. It would have to be reworded a little. It's not tailored to this use. It's tailored to vendors and contractors. So it's not tailored to like Yale faculty requesting data. It's tailored to someone serving as a vendor to an institution. But like, those are fixable problems. That's my own assessment of that questionnaire. So take it for what it's worth. Do you want me to stop screen sharing? There are questions on the process. Who would complete this? What information do you need to make a decision? Who would make that decision at your agency? I think for the like executive branch agencies, there's a question for those of us that are working with Central IT about, and Bob, it can help us figure out the answer to this, but the extent to which would BITS assist in the review of these for agencies? Would they be able to provide, sort of pre-filling parts of it for agencies, and agencies that have different answers to some of the questions? So I think that's a question for maybe Bob and then Jeff.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of things, because like I said, the state network really is managed by CEN and BITS, so they should be able to provide a lot of that stuff.
Right. So we'll, unless there's other questions, you have these documents, you have the flow chart. You can start asking questions. We'll draft policy and process documents sometime in the next few weeks and get those out to you before the January meeting. And if we can, I'm not sure what we can do to provide access to the SIGLET questionnaire, but we can see what's an option for that. And again, that's one of, I think, a set of tools that do essentially the same thing, which is to implement portions of security standards and use that to develop an assessment. So it's seems like a good tool. It's not the only one out there, and so we'll have to figure out like questions on the approach and procurement and some of those things, and that may take longer than is necessary, which is one of the reasons we drafted sort of an interim solution, because as it currently stands, we have nothing in place for this, and I would rather have something than nothing. So having something that's based on sort of, a set of standard questions gives us a basis to start doing this, and then we'll identify the right tool over time. Yeah, Jen.
Thanks. Yes, so it's from our perspective, we want to make sure that the security folks are the ones that approve what the questionnaire is. So it's about the security piece that the security folks are brought into determining, even on a temporary basis, what the questionnaire should look like. It's like,
yeah, and I should say, and we have I'm grateful again to Chris Bernard, the UConn CISO, and Peter Carey, the CSCU CISO, and Jeff Brown, our state CISO, for this. But all three of them, I think, are reviewing exactly the same documents. Chris provided the access to this. It is at the end of the day, the approval of the policy and process is the purview of the members of this board. But how you want to do this, and I'm looking particularly for like more Paul, the nonprofit agencies, sort of like how you want to determine this. And for the state agencies, we rely on Central IT, but agencies may have their own questions about this for their own security purposes. So you have, the question is about sort of the release of your data and what information you need to make that decision. So we're definitely consulting State CISO, his team. We've gone through, I think, pretty good review of this, and as far as I know, the CSU and UConn CISOs as well. And if there's other folks that you want to bring into this process, please do so. We want exactly the same thing.
Scott, I could probably ask Chris to get on a call with us if we aren't officially allowed to
overcomplicate it. I emailed him this morning about the same thing.
Saying, I'm just saying he would probably be happy to let everyone know if we can't get screenshots of the instrument, or he would be willing to get on a call and just talk about it.
Yeah,
at some point in the future.
We could do like a separate session about it or something. I don't know if that's like useful for the learning meetings. So
sure.
I'm cognizant this is a public meeting too, so I want to be very, very careful if we're sharing screenshots of someone's proprietary software.
Right. So. Yeah, we could maybe do it in a separate meeting.
We could set that up for the learning session in January.
That would work.
Okay, cool.
I mean, technically, I think the SIG site also will allow you to request a live demo, but Chris would be willing to get on a call with us. So just let me know, Katie. We can get it on his calendar.
Cool. I'll reach out after this meeting so we can get that set up.
Okay. All right.
So I'm just going to repeat what Scott said. Please let us know if you have any feedback or thoughts on the flowchart data security. We'll be setting up that meeting with Chris for the learning session in January. Again, we also would like to hear your feedback and thoughts about the data matching process. Maura, sorry.
Thanks. I just wanted to loop back quickly to the data requests. I was wondering, we noticed, there's a lot of overlap in some of the requests, and we were wondering, is there any appetite for, I know it obviously doesn't make sense for every agency, but for the agencies that have similar type data sets, is there any appetite for developing like a standardized data set to kind of streamline the process to make things a little bit easier for, I guess, everyone? I know we kind of did that years ago with higher ed, at least, but I don't know. It's kind of not exactly that way anymore. So I don't know.
Yeah, we've definitely been getting a lot of varied data requests that would require many of the same or at least similar data sets. So yeah, it definitely would like to have that discussion with folks. Though we do only have 2 minutes, so we can make this the agenda topic for discussion, I guess, in January. But in the meantime, if folks have ideas or thoughts, or if we want to set aside another just like quick meeting to have with folks who are interested in getting that, or at least in discussing the possibility of doing that. I guess the question is there a desire to have a meeting to discuss this in the next couple of weeks?
And just to clarify, I'm sorry, just make sure I understand the question. You mean lining up our data dictionaries, the data we collect, or is that the question? When you say lining up data sets, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking sort of more of like a standardized data set for the fields that obviously, there's going to be a lot that don't overlap between the different agencies, and then also just thinking about some of the data requests, like a lot of them are overlapping, and maybe it would be, we could figure out a way to do it so it's not so burdensome for, I mean, everyone, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
Do we have, are we going to try to have a learning session in 2 weeks?
We can if there is the desire for it. We didn't
Well,
have
this would be,
a topic, but we do now have a topic.
well, that's what I'm thinking. And maybe the learning session, instead of being, what we usually have as a learning session, have it be, I think the abstract concept that Maura has proposed, I think is maybe scary, but I think that the specifics around the particular data requests we see right now could be a framework to point towards something that she's talking about. And I think that going through some of those in 2 weeks, because they're sort of live out there anyway, would be useful. And then that might point us toward a solution to the, like, it doesn't have to be everybody part of that, but maybe we have enough overlapping requests right now that we could actually think about what would be a reasonable.
Yeah. So our learning session would be Friday the 16th, and I think it would be beneficial to discuss the frequently requested data elements and how we can streamline the process as we see a growing number of data requests that include those same data sets. So I will send out an updated calendar invite for that on the 16th. And I encourage everyone here to attend. Other than that, so other next steps, we'll be following up with the 2023 calendar. We'll be setting up quarterly meetings with data stewards, and we are looking forward to your feedback on data matching and data security, and we will continue to have those conversations. Jan.
I'm sorry we're over time, but I think it's really important to continue to raise this to the top, but that the Data Governing Board has a role in determining that the breach resolution process is, we have a breach resolution. We understand what it is. It's been documented. Everybody agrees that with those steps. We can't lose sight that that's important.
Right, and that was shared with you and Ajit, and we will discuss that at the January meeting. But we can disseminate it once it's approved with the larger group.
I just think it might require more discussion than just with Ajit and I, for more people to weigh in on it as well. But January, I gotcha. Thank you. Sorry to hold us over.
Just to clarify too, I think the rationale was also so that in the two impacted agencies would say, yes, this makes sense to us, and then we would have the discussion with the whole group. It just sounds like it makes sense to do it the other way around.
I understand.
Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.